We invite you to our virtual work sessions. Join us from December 6 to 9.
O Congresso Internacional da Associação Brasileira da Propriedade Intelectual chega neste ano de 2020 à sua 40ª edição, totalmente digital e online, como os tempos estão a exigir. Se você ainda não é sócio da ABPI, associe-se já e garanta assim sua participação no maior congresso de propriedade intelectual da América Latina.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Brazilian IP Association and the Inter-American IP Association, we welcome you all to the webinar, IP Competition and Collaboration During a Global Crisis, COVID-19, organized by ABPI and ASIPI in partnership. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We welcome the authorities connected here with us. Please, if you have any question, I kindly ask you to wait until the end of the session when you'll be able to publicly make your questions through the chat icon in the below bar of your screen, bottom bar of your screen. We will now introduce you to our moderator this afternoon, Mrs. Roberta Cabral. She's a partner at Dannemann Siemsen, lawyer, specialized in civil procedure at the Catholic University and FGV. Before I pass the floor to Mrs. Cabral, I would like to wish you all a fruitful and positive debate. The floor is yours, Mrs. Cabral.
Buenas tardes, boa tarde, good afternoon, everybody. So welcome to our webinar. On our panel today, I will welcome Judge Caroline Tauk. Ms. Tauk is a federal judge in Rio de Janeiro and assistant judge at the Supreme Court. Mrs. Ana Carolina Cagnoni. Mrs. Cagnoni is the IP and Compliance Director at Interfarma, the Pharmaceutical Industry Research Association. And Mr. Cristian Bittel. Mrs. Bittel is the President of the Patent Committee at ASIPI, the Associação Interamericana de la Propriedade Intelectual. As we know, the coronavirus pandemic has spread throughout the world, creating unprecedented pressure on social, health, and economic systems. The first case was identified last year on December 12 in Wuhan, China, and on March 11, the World Health Organization characterized COVID as a pandemic, and since then, thousands of people have died and millions lost their jobs. In view of this, I can see that the pharmaceutical companies have been working very hard to develop vaccine in record times. Exceptionally, a strategic alliance among the industrial leaders are being formed to exchange scientific experience, technologies, and capabilities, and are essential to making the coronavirus vaccine available as soon as possible to help the world be better prepared or even prevent future coronavirus outbreaks. So in this scenario, intellectual property has enabled the development of several technologies, medicines, and vaccines for the treatment of those infected, as well as the creation of new instruments that are now being tested for additional use against the fight against the COVID. And most of these technologies already have some type of intellectual property protection or will be subject to protection when the respective registration is obtained. A good example between labs, the collaboration between labs in Brazil, I read last week in the news, is that, for example, as a result of the partnerships between the Federal University of Rio, the Vital Brasil Institute, and Fiocruz, Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, they have developed a horse serum that gave a positive response in their production of antibodies against COVID. And according to the news that I read, the studies demonstrated that the antibodies produced by the horses neutralized the COVID virus with up, I think, 100 times more power. So, and they have filed a patent application before the ABPTO to protect the production process of the anti-SARS-CoV, and this treatment and the vaccine would be complementary. So these exceptional and collaborative scenarios playing out in the labs all over the world raise a lot of important questions for the IP community, such as, what does this global pandemic teach us about the importance and management of intellectual property now? What is the importance of science as a source of information and solution? And what is the importance of this collaboration between different players? To answer these questions and analyze other aspects of this exceptional scenario and bring us all the knowledge, I would like to firstly welcome Judge Caroline, remembering that all the participants may use the chat for questions. I'll be here checking, and in the end of the presentation, I will bring up as many questions as possible to our speakers. Now, welcome Judge Caroline, and thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Boa tarde e buenas tardes. I want to thank Roberta Magalhães for the invitation, and ABPI, ABPI, and ASIPI for the organization of this webinar. I would like to greet the other panelists, Cristian and Ana Carolina. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to greet all the audience that is here. I can't see you, but I think I just have to click in somewhere and here, and I'll find all you watching here. But anyway, I want to say hi to everyone. I will share my slides here. Can you see?
We can see the presentation, just the
Okay.
file.
Let me try again.
Now it's okay.
Can you see now?
You can go on, yeah.
Okay. So the main issue that I want to address is why haven't we invested in vaccines before? Why have we gone? Why are we in this situation now? And why haven't we thought about this crisis before? So in other words, how could scientists stop the next pandemic before it starts? So the main presentation will focus on line economics and how line economics explain the low incentives to invest in research to identify virus outbreaks like this, and the need to reformulate the current model. The conclusion will be the need to reformulate the current model. So in 2017, I studied about SARS, which is the first coronavirus kind of virus. In 2007, this study concludes that the presence of a large reservoir of SARS-CoV virus in horseshoes bats, together with the culture of eating exotic mammals in southern China, is a time bomb. So by that time, in 2017, when they were studying bats and virus, there were the coronavirus reservoir in bats, together with this culture of eating exotic mammals, they conclude in 2017 that it was a time bomb. But seems that nothing was done, not in a large scale until now. So as Professor Germán Velázquez says, he is from Argentina, just like Cristian. He says, we were warned, but it seems that we didn't do enough. So how to deal with the underinvestment in research and development, R&D, of pharmaceutical products to face this large-scale virus outbreak like this that we are experiencing now? We have some short-term solutions, and we also have some long-term solutions. I'm going to start with these short-term solutions because they are important to solve the problem now, but they won't reformulate the model. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk about the long-term solutions that are some proposals to try to reformulate the model and to avoid that a next outbreak like this happens in the near future. So the first short-term solution are non-legislative mechanisms to circumvent the exclusive rights granted with a patent. So for example, if a patent is registered in the near future, we should think about the adoption of voluntary licensing and the board sharing of technologies. And this was suggested by Costa Rica in a letter which Costa Rica sent to the World Health Organization, suggesting that the companies, especially the industrial pharmacy, could make voluntary licensing and board and make a share of and share their technologies to help other companies, like Roberta said, to help other companies to research the same topics that they were researching. And in the private initiative, we had an Open COVID Pledge, which is a group of companies. They were suggesting to do the same. So if companies are researching about something that could be used to coronavirus outbreak, they should license this research for free, at least during this pandemic. So this Open COVID Pledge, it's an example of an initiative led by some big enterprises like Facebook, Amazon, IBM. And if you can read here in the end of this slide, they say, we pledge to make our intellectual property available free of charge for use in ending the COVID-19 pandemic and minimizing the impact of this disease. So this kind of initiative needs the cooperation of these companies, because they have to, for free, license their whatever they have in researching against COVID-19. But we not always have this kind of cooperation. So if we don't have the cooperation, if we don't have the cooperation by the industrial pharmacy, we need some solutions that are more compulsory and not voluntary like we expect. So in the short-term solution recommended is laws authorizing compulsory license, and it has been discussing a lot in the last months. So I'm going to be very short here. So we have the compulsory license, and we have this in the TRIPS agreement and in our Brazilian law, in the Article 71, and it says that in the case of national emergency or public interest declared in an act of the federal executive branch, as long as the patent holder or its licensee does not meet this need, a compulsory license, temporary and a non-exclusive license may be granted ex officio. So what does this mean? That the company, the industrial pharmacy, could be forced to share their patent with other companies for a temporary and non-exclusive period of time. So we have some bills in Brazil they are now in the lower house or chamber of deputies, but they are important to solve the problem right now, and they won't make difference in the future to avoid the next pandemic, the next outbreak. So as I said, these are short-term solutions. How can we think about other kind of solutions? We have here an example of short-term solution. This ABPI, this company, Israel issued a compulsory license against this company to share its patents. It was HIV pill that Israel was expecting to use against this coronavirus pandemic to help to find a cure. And once Israel issued this compulsory license, ABPI voluntarily decided to allow generic companies to do the same, to use these HIV pills. So we had in the first time a compulsory license issued by the government of Israel. And after that, we had ABPI voluntarily license its patents. So we had first a compulsory and then a voluntary license. We had the cooperation of ABPI. But if we think about the future, what can we do about the future? What can we do to avoid a next outbreak virus like this? We have to think about long-term solutions. So, and this is the main question of my lecture. To recover the costs from investments in R&D, in research and development, the pharmaceutical industry determines the research priorities based on the market demands. So not always what is important to the market is correspondent to all the population's health needs. Sometimes the population's health needs are different from what the market is demanding. And this is the problem here. So the justification for intellectual property rights from this economic theory perspective says that IP creates incentives for market players so that these market players will invest in research and development despite the high costs. Since the inventor is given the possibility of being rewarded for its value, social value in the near future. So the inventor will invest in research because in the near future, he has the chance to have a patent and have the exclusive rights to use that patent and then be rewarded for its social costs. So IP eliminates this market failure and make it interesting to the inventor to invest in patents. The problem is that if we think about vaccines, for example, not always it's very interesting to the investor to make research about this. Why? Why vaccines is not a good thing that companies will invest on? Because vaccines have high fixed costs for research and development, but they have relatively low manufacturing costs. And the governments normally they obtain these vaccines at a price that will cover only the manufacturing costs, but not the R&D costs. So the investor will spend a lot of money researching for that vaccine, but when he sells it and when he obtains the patent and sells it, especially for the governments, he not always will be rewarded as he expects because the government will buy his vaccines for a low manufacturing cost. Plus, we have a time-consistent problem. The demand may be insufficient in normal times. We have during an epidemic time, for example, a high demand for that vaccine. But when that epidemic is low, no one will be interested in buying vaccines at a large scale. So the investor won't be rewarded again. So vaccines generate a positive externality. What is this? Vaccines provide social benefits for the society, such as humanizing the society because the society will have the vaccine. But the social benefits won't pay off the investor. Why? Because the private returns that the investor expects to receive, he won't get it. This generates a market failure and a consequent underinvestment in this field of research and development. So this explains a lot why that study in 2017 said that we had a time bomb problem in China because we had a lot of coronavirus in bats and people are eating bats and we need to investigate this. But the pharmaceutical industry didn't do a lot about that because they know they won't be rewarded as they expected. So here it's a magazine, New York Times, and this Professor Peter Daszak, he's a disease ecologist, and he says that they knew disease X, and disease X was a disease that could come from for animals like bats. They knew that disease X was coming. It's here now, and we need to stop what drives these mass epidemics instead of just responding to individual diseases like we are doing now. And this is another example of not only vaccines that have market failures, but other kind of diseases, other kind of health population needs have market failures, and we need other kinds of companies to research about that. Not only the industrial company, the private industrial company. This is an example of an initiative called Drugs for Neglected Disease. It's a public initiative, private public initiative, and they have been researching only for neglected disease. And if they had to wait for the private companies, for the private sector to invest on this kind of research, they won't have the good results that they are having now. So what are the proposals for this new health research founding models? What can we do to make a little bit different the way we are researching now? So the first proposal is set different kind of priorities, setting research priorities in the pharmaceutical industry in a different way. How can we do this? And the magazine, the New York Times paper that I told you in a couple of slides earlier, that professor said that we have 1.67 million unknown viruses of the type that have previously emerged in people. So it means viruses that are in animals, but they can migrate to people. And discovering this kind of virus is a priority. Why? Because we have to know our enemy. We have to know what know this kind of virus that could come to people and emerge to people and cause another pandemic. The second proposal to reformulate this R&D research model now is engage companies to do more research on vaccines and price them reasonably. For example, try to price them close to the production costs instead of the manufacturing costs. As I told you before, we have a market failure because governments want to buy vaccines by the price of the manufacturing costs, which are very low. But the industry want to sell, and they will be interested in researching more if we try to price them close to the production costs. The advantage of bringing these companies to this kind of research is take advantage of the skills that they already have, because they have been developing lots of technologies in health systems, so they know how it works, and we can use their manufacturing infrastructure plus their database and the employees. And a good example to engage these companies in this kind of research is make public-private partnership. As we have here in the picture, it's an European partnership. It's one of the oldest in Europe, and they have been showing very good results. We can see here on the bottom, they have 6.3 billion euros invested in research, and normally they do research in neglected disease and about health needs that normally the pharmaceutical industry, the pharmaceutical private industry are not interested in doing. And if you see here, they have good numbers about what they have been doing. So engage the private sector to work with the public sector. It's another proposal. The third proposal is facilitate the coordination of public and philanthropic funders. Why do we have to do that? Because sometimes we have public funders and philanthropic funders working on the same research, but they don't know they're doing that. So if we coordinate them, if we make them work together, we will have much better results. And they are not under pressure to generate continuous revenue growth and raise the price of medicines like the private sector is. So if they work together, they can focus on what the private sector is not interested in focusing on. So this is a good strategy to make private sector works on what they want to work, and let other health needs to be researched by those that does not work under pressure to have always good revenue. And this fourth proposal is strengthen national health research system. Like in Brazil, we have a large public park of laboratories like Farmanguinhos. I'm not sure if probably who is not from Brazil knows about that, Farmanguinhos. And it's a public laboratory that is capable of developing and manufacturing medicines on their own. So use their capabilities to research and develop, and plus to produce what is not important to the private sector is another proposal. And these kind of proposals, both of them want to reduce the dependence of R&D on the private sector markets on incentives, as I said. So to conclude, we have a proof now that we had a market failure in researching about vaccines, because now we can see that we have a lot of interest in people researching and companies researching about the cure for the coronavirus. So vaccines developers are working with unexpected speed since the first genome sequence was released. And we had the fast acceleration of public and private funding. And we have millions of people willing to pay whatever the price is to have access to this kind of treatments. So it shows that if we have enough demand, the private sector will invest on this kind of research. And as now we have a lot of demand, of course, the private sector is investing on this. So most market failures related to R&D, if we talk about vaccines, they have disappeared now, as we can see. It shows that in the near future, if we can try to diminish these market failures, we can have proper research and development and what is important, and avoid a next epidemic like this or pandemic like this. So the conclusion is we had obvious progress in public health, but we still have some persistent failures. We have the need to reformulate the current pharmaceutical R&D model, which has been proven inefficient to provide the global solution that the virus outbreak such as COVID-19 requires. But we can think about a lot of proposals to have a better future, a better near future. So that's it. Thank you very much for your audience.
Caroline, thank you very much for your presentation. The pandemic favors several reflections, and we indeed need talent, investment, and in innovation and new medicine. And now I'm going to ask Ms. Cagnoni to come on the stage. Welcome, Ms. Cagnoni.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you. Hello, Cristian. Before I share my slides, I must say it's a very important topic to be discussed, and I'm very happy to be invited to this discussion. So I would like to thank ABPI and ASIPI, Roberta, Caroline, and Cristian. It's very nice to be here and debate with you and share thoughts and expand our knowledge regarding the pandemic and everything that we see. So as I said, I will share some slides of what some other issues that we need to discuss also, and to put perspective in relation to the pandemic and to the whole situation regarding pharmaceutical companies, and also not only pharmaceutical companies, but innovators and inventors that are working and struggling to find a very fast solution for this unprecedented situation that we're living. And so I will basically start I think before this discussion, it's important to say that I represent Interfarma as an IP and compliance director. Interfarma, it's a Brazilian non-profit association. We work in Brazil. Our headquarters before the pandemic, it's in São Paulo. Now everybody's at home, but our headquarters is in São Paulo City. We represent more than 50 Brazilian pharmaceutical companies that are dedicated to research and development of products related to health. And all of them are in Brazil, located in Brazil. I have representatives in Brazil. And roughly, our associates represent 80% of the market on medicines that are known as reference medicines. There are state-of-the-art medicines, including pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical medicines as well. But we also represent 30% of the generic drug industry in Brazil. And this is one of the facts that most people don't know about Interfarma and Interfarma Associates. I invite everybody to visit our website, which is interfarma.org.br. It's available both in Portuguese and in English. If anyone in the audience is not comfortable in speaking Portuguese, and it's soon to be reformulated, but it has some interesting information. Some of them I am putting in the slides in a few minutes. And also we are always releasing information and studies and materials that are basically related to the pharmaceutical sector in Brazil. So it's also interesting to follow our social media accounts. With this brief initial presentation, everybody's able to see my screen, I believe, right? So I will make it a bit bigger. I guess it's better like. So we're talking about the focus here is talking about COVID pandemic, and this is something that we found out only in late December, early January this year. I know everybody thinks that this year it's a decade, but it's just less than 12 months that we're facing this reality. And the COVID-19 is an unprecedented crisis because it definitely brings unprecedented challenges to everybody, including the pharmaceutical companies, of course. We face a new enemy, as the judge mentioned, the virus, but we're also facing all sorts of different challenges. We're facing fake news challenges that basically dispute the existence of the virus. We face conspiracy theories, misinformation, how to treat it, how to prevent it, what should be done, masks, washing hands, different kinds of information. We face political disputes from local, regional, and global levels. So this brings us to a very uncertain period of not irrelevant parts of the population don't know what to believe, who to trust. And if you have this scenario of uncertainty, collaboration, of course, is harmed and it's basically put in question. I bring some very interesting news from my perspective because somehow they are quite shocking, that we see researchers in different countries pointing out that many people wouldn't take a vaccine, which it's quite shocking because, as Caroline mentioned, we are facing a situation that we arguably could say that it was known before. And it's a very interesting information that she brought. But what is also shocking is that you see numbers of half of the people in UK wouldn't take a vaccine. Only half would take a vaccine. 10% would not take a vaccine. In Brazil, it goes to 1 in 4 Brazilians would not take a vaccine. And we're talking about an approved, free of cost vaccine. So we have these numbers, and these are quite surprising because it shows definitely that people really don't know on who to trust. And then we see some declarations from public figures, from representatives, from leaders of countries to say that people shouldn't be obligated to vaccine, and science and the other representatives of basically defending knowledge say that if everybody doesn't get the vaccine, then we're basically not in a safe place. So this is something that we should definitely address, because what we see is that as in other situations, but most importantly today, science is the one that everybody's turning into to show, to present solid information and of course solutions, either to prevent or to treat this new disease, this new virus. So scientific answer definitely, and I agree with Caroline, it needs to come from all stakeholders, researchers, industries, universities, media, government in general. It's very, very complicated for you to target one single sector or a group of people to find the solution, especially because innovation, knowledge, science, and research and development is not created from one day to the other. It's pretty much a consensus nowadays that innovation is something that it builds upon previous innovation. It's something that it's uncertain, so you have to basically seek for 10 different solutions in order for you to find one, and 10 is a very small number. It's many more attempts of success that lately turn out into failure, so you can have one single success. And also invest in innovation. It's a collective endeavor, so it basically is the work of many to reach out to a successful solution. This obviously means, and I think Caroline pointed this out in her presentation, that investment in research and development, it's a long-term endeavor. So when she considers that what should we be doing now to prevent the next pandemic or to avoid this to happen today, it's important to think that investments of which we're getting the fruits today were decided to be made 10, 20 years ago, because 20 years is pretty much the time it takes for a medicine to be developed. For the first research to the final approval from FDAs and other regulatory authorities around the globe. So it's a very long-term endeavor. It requires not only the ability for you to foresee what's next, but also for you to have constant and consistent investment in trying to seek for a solution for something that you believe it's a problem long time ago. So what we're researching today, it's what we believe, and I mean all researchers, not only pharmaceutical companies like the private sector, but researchers in general. What we're researching today is what we believe it will be an issue in 10, 15 years from today, which means that something that is completely unprecedented, like a virus epidemic, it's really harder for you to assess. And also, it's almost like a cliche to mention, but the longer the investment, the greater the costs, and it's somehow there is somehow economic evaluation that for each medicine you need to take $1.4 billion from first research to market commercialization of the same research. So this is a huge amount of money for one medicine in a very long period of time, which means that it also needs, if you take the same amount of money to invest in a shorter return industry, for example, automotive industry or chemical industry or other industries that are less complicated or complex for you to achieve success, this this investment would pay off earlier than pharmaceutical companies. So these are some of the challenges and difficulties that the sector faces on a day-to-day basis, and not only during the pandemic. I was seeking today, and as you will see updated September 29, on the New York Times, they have a COVID vaccine tracker, which is very interesting for you to follow because it gives you the whole dimension on the global effort that is currently being made to seek for the vaccine. So definitely we can say that science and all the stakeholders are seeking for an answer to COVID-19. We have today four different types of vaccines. They are either a DNA RNA vaccines, or they are protein-based vaccines, or there are other possibilities, genetic vaccines and viral vector vaccines. So there are different approaches that's being taken by more than 70 entities to basically get the solution, get to the final success substance that will work effectively and safely as a vaccine to COVID. We're now having the amazing number of 43 vaccines that are being developed either in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We hear news on the most likely to be earlier adopted, like the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine that we hear a lot in Brazil, or the Sinovac vaccine that São Paulo government is in a joint collaboration with the Chinese company. There is also news on Pfizer vaccines and Sanofi, and also I forgot the name of the company, but I'll check later. But there are some companies that are basically investing in different types of vaccines, trying to reach a fast solution for this. Following on the vaccine dilemma, we need, as I said, this is a long-term, very hard and big investment that is needed for developing new drugs, either for prevention or treatment of all different sorts of diseases. And another very, very new, very current information, and that's why I didn't have it in English. This last column here on the right side shows what was on a Folha de São Paulo cover today. It basically shows, as we reached 1 million deaths with COVID-19 in the current year, from 9 January to 28th of September, we unfortunately reached 1 million, the figure on a global death amount. It puts into perspective how coronavirus is in comparison with other diseases, because and unfortunately people don't only die out of COVID-19. So we do have diabetes, we have cardio diseases, we have other viruses such as HIV, tuberculosis, which it's a bacteria, not a virus, but we have Ebola, we have other diseases that do represent diseases that also need to be researched, to be well treated or even prevented for 7 billion people in the world. And if you consider the numbers on companies, on industrial sectors, economic sectors that invest in research and development, at Interfarma, we have figures that pharmaceutical companies, they, on a global scale, they invest more than any other sector on R&D. We invest more than automotive, hardware, software, tech companies, which are currently very in the spotlight, electronical chemicals. So the numbers Interfarma presents in its guide in 2019 is that we're talking about over 100 billion euros of investment for the pharmaceutical sector. And as this charter shows in the screen, this is a constant investment. So the blue column shows from 2010 to 2024, and this doesn't include COVID because it was presented pretty much in the early beginnings of the pandemic. It shows that the industry consistently invest in R&D, because of course this is the core business of the company, and we are investing, the companies are investing today on solutions that are to be on the market, available to patients within at least 10 years in the future. The other blue line shows the differences that although R&D investments, they maintain in a growing scale, the general income and what the industry, basically the revenues of the industry, they are ups and downs, as it depends on economic crisis, it depends on other factors. But the main idea with this graphic is that regardless on how well the company, the sector is, how well it has its revenues, research and development spent is basically a non-changing item in the budget of these companies. The question is this enough? Are the companies able to cover all the diseases and to present solutions in a timely manner, in a sufficient manner? That's something that actually we definitely need to rethink, and also to rethink how to incentivize not only pharmaceutical companies, but other actors and stakeholders to also invest in research and development and education and fostering technologies. So to conclude, we need to reach to the point of where is intellectual property and specifically patents in this whole scenario. The intellectual property is an existing tool, a legal existing tool that was created to foster innovation. It was something developed in the late 18th century. And the idea behind it is to strike the right balance between the inventors, either private or public inventors, and society as a whole. So the system basically organizes itself to, in one hand, reward and incentivize inventors in developing new ideas, basically granting them a specific temporary time, limited time to exclusively enjoy benefits of its inventions. And on the other side, the inventor is willing to basically communicate to the public information on what he invented. IP, it's a solution, it's a tool, it's not mandatory. No one is forced to present a patent anywhere. It's basically being done in order to, as it's possible to benefit from the system. Open information, it's vital for collaboration and for the creation of new knowledge, for improvement of further research, greater access. It also allows companies that are not basically investing in research and development to later, after the exclusivity time of IP protection, to copy the invention and make it more easily accessible to the general public. But the whole idea of it is for it to have a pause, a temporary limited time of exclusivity, so it rewards and incentivizes inventors in keep on doing its investments in research and development of new products and new solutions. Patents not necessarily prevent competition. As we mentioned, and this is a very, very easy thing to see, we have 43 vaccines. They will basically compete. If all of them are successful, they will basically compete with each other. So each company that is seeking to develop a vaccine, they will probably compete to see which vaccine is more interesting, which vaccine is easier to produce, which vaccine is more accessible, it will be cheaper. So although they could all be rewarded with patents because they find a different solution for the COVID infection, they not necessarily are, how can I say, they're not necessarily prevent any sort of competition. So there is a connection between competition and IP, but they're not necessarily a prevention of competition because of IP. I think with that, I finished my presentation. I'm not sure if I extended too much. Roberta, if I did, I'm sorry, but I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Oh, Ana, it was great. Thank you very much. I think that we have never needed innovation as much as now, and biopharmaceutical companies are investing significantly and are taking many risks without any guarantee that their medicines or vaccines will be successful. So thank you very much. Before calling Mr. Bittel, I would like to register here the presence of Ms. Elizabeth Siemsen, who is the president of ASIPI and partner at Dannemann Siemsen. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us today and helping us to organize this webinar. Thank you very much. And finally, I will call on Mr. Bittel to speak. Welcome, Mr. Bittel.
Okay, hello, how are you? Well, thank you in the first place for the introduction. Again, thank you for being able to be here, share this panel with Caroline, with Ana Caroline. In fact, I don't know if I should thank them because it's going to be a challenge for me to speak after them. And thank you, of course, Roberta and Elizabeth for the opportunity. So I also have a presentation I'm going to share now. Give me a second. I think, sorry, may fail. I have a problem with the presentation itself. So I guess you should be, can you see the presentation right now?
Yes, perfect, Chris.
Okay.
It's okay.
Sorry for that. So, well, as both my co-speakers mentioned before, this global crisis caused by the COVID pandemics have put all of us under stress conditions. And this is not just stress to our health systems, but also to the way we interact with each other. So it's day-to-day life that is being affected, the way we learn and teach at schools, the way we practice commerce, and of course, IP and the scientific systems are not an exception to that. And it all began in China. By the beginning of December last year, the first cases of a new disease appeared. By the end of December, the Wuhan health authorities identified all those cases that up to that moment were isolated cases. They were able to cluster them, to identify them as a new disease. Just a few days after that, the Chinese health authorities reported the existence of a new virus, which was the cause for that new disease. And one day after that, the full genome sequence of the virus itself was made available on the GenBank database. This, from a molecular biologist perspective, would have been impossible 15 years ago. You know, it is obvious that the advancement of technology and that many laboratories and groups and scientific groups were working together to have such a development in such a short time. And then the point is, with all the information we got from the genome sequence, we can now have an idea of what the virus is like, what it looks like. If you look at the graphic on the left side, you're gonna see the outside of the virus, the way you would be able to see it if we were able to see at the molecular scale. And then on the right, you can see the interior of the virus. There you can see specify the different proteins and the genetic material that is inside. If you look at the virus from the outside, there are two major proteins that are available, that are easily seen. This yellow one, the blue one, we are not gonna get too technical, but basically the knowledge of knowing the structure of the virus allowed us to begin working on a vaccine. And so to have an oversimplistic idea of what a vaccine is and how it is designed, I thought of simplifying the model. So the bad guy is a guy that can be harmful. It has weapons, and the main object of our immune system is to identify the virus, to neutralize it, and eventually kill it. The point is that in order to do so, our immune system needs to know the bad guy in advance. So the first time our immune system is exposed to the virus, it has no clue on whether that guy is a good or bad guy. So as regards to the coronavirus, the immune system is blank, no idea about it. So what's the basic idea of a vaccine is to teach the immune system to identify the virus without having the disease. So without exposing our body to the disease itself. So the point is that no matter whether the immune system has already met other bad guys, other viruses, it will not be able to identify this new virus unless that virus shares some features with the previous ones. And so one of the aims of a vaccine is to teach the immune system to identify this new virus. And at the same time, a vaccine should be safe enough so that it will not be attacking the good guys. So this would be the cells of our body. And basically, there are some typical strategies to do that. One option could be to provide a virus which has been modified some way. So in this case, we took out the guns so that the virus is not as infective as the natural one, but anyway is very similar to the infective virus and will allow the immune system to know it in advance. Another option could be to provide the system, our body, with the dead virus. So you can also provide the dead virus. Since the virus is dead, it's not going to produce the disease, but will help to the immune system to know the guy in advance. These are in industry. These vaccines are called attenuated when you use a virus which is not infective or not as infective as the as the natural one, or inactivated vaccines when you are providing a dead virus. Then another option, another strategy would be to provide a part of the virus to the immune system, so that the immune system will learn to identify a part of the virus, let's say a hat and the torso, but it will not be, there will be no chance of having the disease, because you are not providing the complete virus. And finally, you can also, additionally, in some cases, you can increase the immunogenicity of your vaccine, in this case the hat, by adding something that will increase the immune response, but in any way will teach the immune system to identify the infective hat of the infective virus. So these vaccines are commonly known as subunit vaccines, because they include just a subunit of the virus itself. And the point is, the vaccines as we know them are droplets or are injectables. So the pharmaceutical form in which a vaccine will be commercialized and then administered is with excipients and adjuvants. The adjuvants are a kind of excipients which are added typically to vaccines to increase in the immunogenicity of these elements. So where I wanted to get is that these vaccines, from a patent perspective, are compositions. So all our vaccines are going to be usually claimed and of course commercialized as compositions, as pharmaceutical compositions. The current status, as well as it's been previously mentioned, is that there are a huge number of vaccines under development. It depends, of course, where you look for the information, but around 175 vaccines are under development right now. This is something unusual. I think it's the first time in world history that such a number of vaccines are under development for a single disease. And I'm going to just mention a few of them just as examples, but of course the number is huge and the different strategies are also many. We have one of the cases you may have read about in the newspapers is the Moderna. This is a US-based company that is developing one of the vaccines that are in trial right now. It's a vaccine that consists of an RNA. So this is a nucleic acid. This is a molecule which is similar to the one that conforms the genome of the virus itself, and it's so it has information that allows the cell when we are injected the vaccine, our own body, based on the information on that RNA, could synthesize the spike protein, which is the yellow protein of the virus. So by administering this vaccine, the vaccine itself triggers that our body will produce this protein, and since this protein is not natural to us, it's going to be recognized by the immune system. So the immune system will learn to identify this particular protein. There are other RNA vaccines that are under development, again, by different companies. You can see sometimes here, for example, the Chinese army with a biotech company, the Imperial College. So we see different actors, not just the typical pharma laboratory, but also academics, and other institutions involved in these developments. This is also something relatively new to all of us. And something interesting is that there's no RNA vaccine that has been approved up to date. So, so this would be really, really something new. Then other strategies are, for example, the one of Inovio Pharmaceuticals. Again, this is also a nucleic acid vaccine, but it's a DNA vaccine instead of our RNA vaccine. Again, the information in this polynucleotide allows our body to encode the spike glycoprotein, again, the yellow protein on the virus envelope. Then we have the Chinese vaccine, which is an inactivated vaccine. Here, the complete virus is being injected, which is inactivated previously. This vaccine has shown good results in the last trials. And this is the technology which is more traditional, let's say. So there are many vaccines now in the market which are inactivated vaccines. This has proven to be a good option in the past. Then we have the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca. This is an interesting case. This is one of the most advanced. I know Brazil has plans to produce it. Argentina and Mexico are working together to produce it also. And this vaccine uses a common cold virus that has been engineered to, again, contain genetic material that encodes the spike protein. The yellow protein is, again, the target. So this virus has been engineered to produce the spike protein of the virus. As you can see, the strategies are more or less in line with what I mentioned in the previous slide. So we are not providing the hat, so the subunit, but we are providing, in this case, we are providing instructions for our body to generate the hat in our body, and then our immune system is able to know one of the features of the virus before it enters our body. Except for this case, in this case, well, we have the inactivated vaccine, as mentioned again in my previous slide. So this is the current situation. I mean, an extra summary of what's going on around the globe with this matter. And then what's happening, just to tell you a little on what's happening in this regard in Argentina. Sorry, son. What's happening in Argentina in relation with COVID patents is that, well, the patent office has been working remotely since mid-March. The good thing of these is that they really improved their online services. By the beginning of the quarantine, you could only do a few things online at the Argentinian INPI. And along all these months, they have been improving that. Now we can do almost everything online. So that's something that, I mean, a good thing of this situation. All the terms have been suspended since then, and that suspension is reviewed every 2-3 weeks. This creates some uncertainty because there's no clue when the all deadlines will be. They are moving permanently, so that's hard to explain to applicants that we have no clue on when deadlines will take place. And something interesting is that no regulations for COVID-related applications have been issued. That's a difference with other patent offices which are trying to use IP as a way to create incentives for development of vaccines and other possible solutions to this problem. So the Argentinian MP seems to be, in other issues, no incentives for the development of new solutions. So what can we expect from COVID-related applications? Here we can divide the kind of inventions we would expect into different kinds. So for the more mechanical, let's say, inventions, ventilators, masks, other devices, we would not expect many problems with those applications in Argentina. The Argentinian Patent Office has reasonable criteria for these kind of inventions. The same happens with detection methods, and this is an interesting point because as regards detection methods, there's also a huge revolution similar to what's happening with vaccines. We are seeing developments that seem to be science fiction on ways to detect the coronavirus. I mean, and those are generally applicable to other viruses. So there's a lot that's going to be left after this crisis in this regard. But as long as there's, as they are methods that are performed outside of the human body and in a laboratory or in a test tube, there should be no problem with those. We do not see a problem with the patentability of them. New uses of new compounds. Those are not patentable according to the current criteria of the Patent Office. And here we can think of, for example, chloroquine, which was one of the candidates to treat, not to prevent, but to treat the coronavirus. So again, no incentives to do research on known compounds that could be useful for the treatment of the disease itself. And then what happens with vaccines? Vaccines, as we mentioned before, are typically compositions and typically claimed as compositions in patent applications. And here we face a problem we have been facing since 2012 in Argentina with the issuance of guidelines which are specific for pharmaceutical inventions. Those guidelines state that new formulations and compositions, as well as the processes for preparing them, must be considered as a general rule obvious in the light of prior art. That means whenever you include a composition claim, whether it is a main claim or a secondary claim, the Argentinian Patent Office will typically raise an inventiveness objection and will tell you that it's obvious because all adjuvants are known, because all excipients are known, because typically when you have a vaccine, if you use a subunit which is identical to the one that is found in the virus, in the natural virus as found in nature, this particular subunit itself is going to be considered to be pre-existent and then not patentable. The virus itself is pre-existent and non-patentable. The only case in which there's something here that could be patented is when you have modified, you have engineered one of your subunits for some reason. And then since 2012, we have seen rejections of composition claims every time, no matter what. So it's interesting to see that we have dozens of laboratories working in developing a vaccine, interacting with each other. the interaction between different foundations and academics with pharma laboratories, a lot of work to create something that for the Argentinian INPI's eyes is obvious. So that is some way nonsense and just tells you where we are. So this is the idea I wanted to share from the Argentinian INPI perspective. We see no incentives to the industry for this effort. So basically, that's it.
Thank you, Cristian, very much for the excellent and informative presentation. In Brazil, just like in Argentina, there are several initiatives as part of an effort to disseminate innovations that have been developed for the treatment of the disease. On July 4 of this year, our BPTO, the Brazilian Patent and Trademark Office, published Ordinance 149 and establishing the priority procedure for patent process that serve the diagnosis and treatment for COVID. And this measure comes amid the world pandemic scenario and the recognition of the state of public calamity in Brazil. So also in the context of the pandemic, our BPTO created in March the Observatory of Technologies related to COVID. And the objective is to disseminate technologies that can help the global situation, including vaccines, medications, diagnostics, tests, masks, and health equipment. In fact, the BPTO correctly identified and implemented a way to assist in this action, as, for example, on examining body for innovations and creations. And these and other initiatives demonstrate the collective effort of the society to mitigate the effect of the new coronavirus, I think. Okay, and now, before I speak too much, let's get started with the first question. The first one that I separate here is to Judge Caroline. Judge Caroline, we are watching a worldwide competition between companies in the pharmaceutical industry for the discovery of the vaccine in the first place. Does collaboration between companies, so stimulated by OMS, have space for research?
As you were saying before, this current crisis demonstrates that there is space for open and collaborative science models, such as the open access to COVID-19. It's a site you can check on Google, for example. You just have to type open access to COVID-19. And it's an initiative built on R&D principles that meet global needs, global health needs. And they are based on open and collaborative science models. So based on this idea, many founding agencies are requesting that the companies make their research available to the public and for free and immediately, as fast as they can. And which is important, it's an important step to stimulate cooperation between researchers. But on the other hand, we have cooperation, and on the other hand, there is an intense competition to find treatments for the virus. So it seems paradoxical, cooperation and competition acting together, but these two ideas together, the cooperation and the competition, they are stimulating and they are speeding up the research, which is very good for us because they are sharing data and they are rushing to get better results. With everything they have been sharing together, one company can use from the other company, and they are running to be the first to find the solution. So that's a good idea of cooperation and competition working together and helping the research, as you asked.
Thank you, Caroline. Now we have a question for Ana Carolina. How the bills of compulsory license pending before the Congress are to affect the IP system as it is today?
First off, I would like to thank Cristian for his presentation. I just loved the legal dolls. It was really clear to understand. And for lawyers like me, it's really a great alternative. I'll definitely copy that in the next presentations that I take. But
thank you.
On compulsory licenses, it's very important to mention. We have proposed, I guess it was 6 different bills of law in the beginning of the pandemic by different congressmen in Brazil that would somehow address compulsory license, and basically they would either propose to amend the current patent law in Brazil or to create exceptions to what the law already provides for compulsory license. And it's important to say Brazilian law already provides for compulsory license, and it establishes the criteria where it would be acceptable for the government to issue a compulsory license. This is also further regulated, and it's a possibility under the current IP system in Brazil. And also, as mentioned, Caroline, it's something that is provided for international treaties as well. What we think on compulsory license is that the bills as they are, they, first of all, they do less of an innovative situation for compulsory license because it's already present, it's already a reality in Brazil. So first of all, they don't add that much when it comes to facilitate, because they are not clear on who should issue the license, for how long, and they're vague on why should these be, not why, but how this should be done. And also I think 1 or 2 of the bills, they include the possibility of issuing compulsory license on the requests and deposits for patents, which it's pretty much contradictory because requests for patents are not something that has been analyzed and provided for as an invention per se. So it's somehow they are not well constructed to create a tool, an additional tool that would help to seek the balance that I was talking before. So in one hand, we have compulsory license in our law, and it is a possibility that would be able to government to organize the balance between the interest of the inventors and the public interest. This is a possibility that it's already there. And in the second, and the other, so in one hand, it doesn't help to strike the balance because it's uncertain and pretty much too broad, all of the bills of law. And in the second place, they provide for uncertainty in the system as it is. So it's, as I mentioned, everyone that is in the system of research and development, the private companies, but also universities, researchers, public institutes, everyone that is operating in the innovation field, they are working under the rules that are being placed. So for you to change the rule from one day to the other in a very sudden move and in a very abstract way as it was provided for in these bills of law, it creates an uncertainty for the players. It creates somehow an unpredictability of what is going to happen if an invention is pretty much achieved. So for these reasons, we think that these bills of law, they really do not cooperate. And I think this is also the view of the Congress, because neither of these bills of law have evolved since they were proposed. They're pretty much in the same way that they are, meaning that we believe it's understood that if we come to a situation where this exceptional measure is needed, and I think that this is very early for us to discuss, the law already provides for mechanisms to restate the balance between investors and public interest.
So, and you, Chris, what can you tell us about compulsory license in Argentina?
Well, the situation is, I mean, as in most of our countries, in line with what is the Paris Convention states, with what TRIPS agreement states, with the Doha Declaration and so on. It is perfectly possible for the government to issue compulsory licenses. There are a few conditions that have to be met. Those are the typical, so I guess there's no difference there with the case of Brazil. Most relevantly, sanitary emergency should have been declared already, and that's the case. I mean, that's the current situation. So in principle, all the conditions are given for a compulsory license. However, in Argentinian practice, never a compulsory license has been issued. So we have no case, no previous case in this regard. Then at some point, the same issue I was mentioning in my presentation, the fact that it's I have my doubts that a patent will be granted to a vaccine, for example, makes it relative, the necessity of a compulsory license. And in any case, being practical, you know, the AstraZeneca and University of Oxford vaccine, that one seems to be in its way to be produced in Argentina in agreement with AstraZeneca. So there doesn't seem to be an issue there. It's going to be produced by an Argentinian company. I don't know exactly, I guess nobody knows exactly the details of what has been agreed with AstraZeneca. The government was involved also. So that was announced by the president. So there's a lot of politics there also. It's going to be produced together with Slim Foundation in Mexico. So at some point, it doesn't seem that it's going to be necessary to issue any compulsory licenses. In any case, the tool is there and could be eventually used.
So I want to thank you, everyone, for the participations, and our speakers for the great presentations and for being available. Thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I hope to see you soon. And I wish you all a good week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay.